Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Classic Hollywood TV, a space where the shadows of the past speak longer and louder than the brightest neon signs of the present. There was a time when science fiction was expected to be clean, optimistic, and wrapped in a pristine, untouchable future. But then came a project that dared to break every rule established by the titans of the industry. A production that stepped away from the glittering stars and anchored itself in the grey, gritty realities of a station at the edge of the galaxy. Star Trek Deep Space Nine was not just another television show, it was a dramatic revolution that dared to explore darker stories, dangerous secrets, shocking betrayals, and heroes who were forced to make choices that the high authorities were never supposed to acknowledge. Yet, as the cameras rolled and the alien makeup was meticulously applied, the true cast behind these complex figures were stepping into their own unexpected and deeply personal journeys. Behind the perfect facade of Hollywood success lay sudden disappearances from the spotlight, painful losses, private struggles, and hidden legacies that fans are only now, decades later, truly beginning to rediscover. Today we look back at this legendary ensemble then and now, pulling back the velvet curtain to uncover what really happened after the great station went dark, and the echoes of the applause finally faded into the archive of history, to understand the profound weight of this story. One must look at the pillar upon which the entire narrative was built, a man who was never meant to fit into the comfortable, uncomplicated mold of a traditional Hollywood hero. Avery Brooks brought a monumental gravity to the screen, a presence so dense and commanding that it altered the trajectory of the franchise forever. Born in 1948, Brooks was 45 years old when he stepped onto the set in 1993, carrying the immense historical weight of becoming the first black-led captain in this cinematic universe. His character, Benjamin Sisko, was far from a flawless saint exploring the cosmos. He was a widower haunted by devastating loss, a father desperately trying to shield his son from a harsh universe, and a commander tasked with rebuilding a fractured world on the brink of collapse. Brooks pushed relentlessly behind the scenes for a portrayal filled with tenderness, strength, and raw emotional honesty, giving television one of its most powerful portraits of familial devotion. In the year 2026, at 78 years of age, his silhouette remains an enduring symbol of destiny and moral ambiguity, reminding us that true leadership is not about remaining untouched by pain, but about carrying that heavy burden without allowing it to destroy the soul. Yet, the brilliance of this era was not sustained by leadership alone, but by the deeply tragic and beautifully complex figures that inhabited the periphery of the frame. There was a quiet lawman, a shapeshifter named Odo, who could transform into almost anything but could never find the one thing he craved most, a sense of true belonging. Rene Auberjonois, born in 1940 and entering the series at the age of 53, used profound restraint to bring this lonely soul to life, relying on sharp glances and a stiff, guarded posture to convey a lifetime of isolation. Off-screen, Auberjonois was a master of theatre and cinema, but it was this silent, searching creature that defined his connection to millions. Though he passed away in 2019 at 79, his performance stands as an immortal question about what happens when the place you originate from cannot teach you how to love. Alongside him stood the youth of the station, Jake Sisko, played by Cirroc Lofton, who entered the production as a mere 15-year-old boy. Lofton grew up before the eyes of the world, transforming his character into a civilian witness to grand history, a writer who rejected the military uniform to hold up a mirror to the world. Now 48 in 2026, Lofton's portrayal remains a timeless testament to the bravery required just to remember, to write, and to survive while the grand machinery of the world moves onward into the dark. As the golden years of the production solidified, the glittering surface began to reveal the intricate, sometimes painful complexities that came with maintaining such a massive, groundbreaking narrative under the intense heat of the studio spotlights. The actors found themselves walking a fine line between the grand, idealistic traditions of the industry and a new, uncompromising style of storytelling that demanded every ounce of their emotional reserves. Behind the scenes, the pressure to deliver excellence was immense, and the actors often had to battle behind closed doors to protect the integrity of their characters against the safe, conventional choices that executives frequently favored. It was an era of intense creative friction, where the glamour of a high-profile Hollywood set met the exhausting reality of long hours, heavy prosthetics, and the deep, psychological weight of portraying characters trapped in an escalating interstellar conflict. This shifting tide of behind-the-scenes tension and evolving character depth was perfectly embodied in the journey of the station's brilliant young medical officer, Julian Bashir. Alexander Siddig, born in 1965, was just 28 years old when the series launched in 1993, initially portraying the Doctor with a certain youthful arrogance and a naive, wide-eyed idealism suited for a fresh academy graduate seeking adventure on the frontier. However, as the seasons progressed, the writers stripped away this comfortable facade, introducing a shocking twist that mirrored the hidden pressures of high society. The revelation that Bashir's brilliance was actually the result of illegal genetic engineering, a secret born from parental desperation and deep-seated shame. Siddig masterfully navigated this transition, transforming a light-hearted character into a deeply guarded, emotionally complex man carrying a heavy, secret burden. His performance captured the true essence of a person who had spent his entire life hiding his true identity to avoid professional ruin and social exile. By the time the dark shadows of the conflict fully enveloped the station, Bashir had evolved from an arrogant intellectual into a deeply compassionate healer who understood that intellect means absolutely nothing without a conscience. In 2026, at 61 years old, Siddig's legacy remains a powerful testament to how a performer can take a pristine, superficial archetype and infuse it with profound human vulnerability. While Bashir's struggles were largely internal and hidden away, the fiery heart of the station's resistance belonged to a woman who carried wounds that the authorities simply could not politely explain away. Nana Visitor stepped into the role of Kira Nerys at the age of 36, bringing a raw, unfiltered intensity that shattered the polite, sterile expectations of traditional television heroines. Kira was a survivor of a brutal, decades-long military occupation, a former child soldier who did not possess the clean diplomatic polish of the regular officers. Visitor fought to ensure that Kira's anger was never portrayed as a mere personality flaw to be corrected, but rather as history speaking directly through her body, a valid response to trauma and systemic oppression. Behind the camera, Visitor balanced the immense emotional demands of this fierce role with a private life lived under the constant scrutiny of a curious public, maintaining her grace while embodying a character who constantly questioned authority and struggled with the impossible concept of forgiveness. Now 69 years old in 2026, Visitor's portrayal of Kira remains an essential cornerstone of the narrative, proving that surviving a tragedy is never the end of a person's story, but merely the difficult ground upon which the real battle for self-discovery begins. In sharp contrast to the high-minded political and spiritual debates echoing through the corridors, the bustling, neon-lit marketplace of the station provided a different kind of truth, anchored by a character who initially seemed destined to remain simple comic relief. Armin Shimmerman, born in 1949, was 44 when he took on the role of the greedy, profit-driven bartender Quark, wearing extensive, heavy makeup that required hours of grueling preparation each morning. Shimmerman, a deeply intelligent and respected stage actor, refused to play the character as a caricature, choosing instead to infuse the foreign merchant with a wounded pride, sharp wit, and a keen sense of cultural survival. Quark became the unofficial confessor of the station, a cynical yet strangely moral figure who saw right through the lofty, self-righteous hypocrisy of the high authorities, frequently pointing out that noble ideals are a luxury easily afforded by those who are not struggling to survive on the margins. Shimmerman's sharp, rhythmic delivery turned the bar into philosophical crossroads where desire, fear, and political intrigue intersected, establishing a brilliant, long-running rivalry with Odo that became the emotional anchor of the daily life on the station. In 2026, at 77 years old, Shimmerman is celebrated not just as a master of character acting, but as the performer who proved that the person counting the coins is often the only one brave enough to tell the ugly truths that the heroes prefer to ignore. As the narrative grew increasingly complex, the production sought to inject a fresh dynamic into the existing ensemble, bringing in a legendary warrior from a past era to shake up the established order. Michael Dorn, who had already spent years cementing his status as a fan favorite on a previous series, joined the cast as Worf at the age of 41, plunging his honorable character into a much harsher, more compromised world than the clean starships he was accustomed to. On this desolate station, Worf could no longer shield himself behind rigid military protocols. He was caught between two vastly different societies, often finding himself too unyielding for the politicians and too principled for the corrupt leaders of his own empire. Dorn's performance deepened significantly during this era, allowing the stoic warrior to experience profound romance, devastating grief, and the quiet, internal torment of a man watching his beloved traditions crumble under the weight of political convenience. Now 74 in 2026, Dorn's understated, powerful performance remains a masterclass in cinematic restraint, showing that true honor is never something a person simply inherits through a noble name, but rather a grueling path that must be tested, lost and painfully chosen all over again in the quiet spaces of the soul. Behind the closed doors of the soundstages and production offices, the series gradually moved into its most daring and controversial era, completely stripping away the comfortable illusions of a perfect universe. The writers and actors entered a dark, uncharted territory where the devastating reality of an all-out galactic war began to reshape every single character. This was the turning point where the production broke away from standard network formulas to deliver a sweeping, serialized epic that explored the hidden costs of survival, the moral compromises made in the name of peace, and the psychological trauma inflicted upon those on the front lines. The studio was no longer just producing an entertaining space adventure. They were crafting a deeply sophisticated, atmospheric commentary on power, statecraft, and human nature, forcing the audience to confront the unsettling truth that even the most civilized societies can lose their way when pushed to the absolute brink. Nowhere was this heartbreaking reality more visible than in the phenomenal transformation of a character the audience had originally vastly underestimated. Aron Eisenberg brought a restless, desperate energy to Nog, a young alien teenager who broke free from the strict profit-driven expectations of his family to become the first of his kind to enter the elite military academy. Eisenberg, who faced significant personal health battles throughout his life, poured his entire heart and soul into a groundbreaking wartime arc that shattered the innocence of the series. When Nog lost his leg in a brutal, muddy trench battle, the production did not simply use a quick, futuristic medical miracle to erase the damage. Instead, they dedicated entire episodes to his grueling psychological recovery, offering one of the most raw, honest, and devastating depictions of post-traumatic stress and physical disability ever broadcast on television. Eisenberg didn't play a brave hero untouched by fear. He portrayed a wounded young man, terrified of the world, hiding in a simulated reality because the real world had become entirely too painful to bear. Tragically, Eisenberg passed away in 2019 at the young age of 50, but his unmatched performance remains a monument of creative courage, showing that true growth is not about achieving perfection, but about having the strength to rebuild your life after pain has completely changed who you are. While Nog represented the tragic loss of innocence on the battlefield, the dark, complex machinery of behind-the-scenes espionage was entirely driven by a mysterious, elegant tailor who lived his life in the shadowy grey areas of the law. Andrew Robinson, born in 1942, was 51 years old when he introduced the world to Garak, a charming, soft-spoken exile who turned every casual conversation into an intricate puzzle and every polite smile into a subtle warning. Garak was a highly trained former intelligence operative who understood the dirty, ruthless methods required to protect an empire, and, as the Great War worsened, the high authorities were forced to rely on his terrifying talents to accomplish the tasks they publicly condemned. Robinson played this delicate balance with a brilliant theatrical perfection, letting the audience enjoy the character's witty banter while constantly reminding them of the lethal, calculating mind hiding beneath the elegant exterior. His fascinating, complex relationship with Dr. Bashir became a brilliant exploration of loneliness and manipulation, revealing a man hollowed out by his loyalty to a state that had utterly abandoned him. showing that spending a lifetime telling lies eventually makes the truth itself an unbearable burden. Now 84 years old in 2026, Robinson's brilliant work stands as a timeless reminder that survival often leaves a deep, invisible scar on the soul. In the midst of this darkness, a quiet revolution of kindness was taking place in the lower decks, championed by a character who spent years being openly dismissed by his own family. Max Gradenchik brought an extraordinary nervous warmth to Rom, a seemingly clumsy maintenance worker who slowly transformed his apparent failures into absolute freedom. Rom completely rejected the cutthroat, exploitative traditions of his capitalist culture, choosing instead to protect his son's dreams, organize an underground labor union for underpaid workers, and use his exceptional engineering mind to save the station from total destruction. Grodenchik's deeply touching performance proved that real, lasting change does not always come from the loud, aggressive warriors who dominate the history books, but often originates from the gentle, overlooked individuals who simply refuse to let the harshness of the world destroy their capacity for love. In the year 2026, at 74 years of age, Grodenchik's portrayal of Rom remains a beautifully triumphant story of hidden brilliance and quiet, unwavering integrity. Yet, every great tragedy requires an antagonist who can match the depth of its heroes, and the production found an absolute masterpiece of psychological villainy in the ruler of the occupying forces. Mark Alamo, born in 1942, gave a chillingly brilliant performance as Gul Dukat, a charismatic, deeply delusional military commander who never truly believed he was the villain of the story. Dukat was a profoundly dangerous dictator because he did not merely crave absolute power. He possessed a terrifying, pathological need to be loved, admired, and validated by the very people he actively oppressed. Alamo never played the character as a simple, one-dimensional monster, choosing instead to infuse him with an elegant charm, a wounded pride, and a deeply unsettling self-pity that perfectly captured the true nature of an authoritarian mind. His complex, obsessive interactions with Major Kira and Captain Sisko revealed a man entirely unable to accept personal responsibility for his monstrous actions, continually twisting history to present himself as a misunderstood savior who deserved applause rather than condemnation. In 2026, at 84 years of age, Alamo's landmark performance stands as a brilliant, haunting warning to the modern world, reminding us that the most terrifying tyrants are always the ones who are completely convinced of their own nobility. As the sweeping grand narrative approached its final bittersweet chapters, the production faced the monumental challenge of weaving together the countless emotional threads it had masterfully spun over 7 intense years. The final act was not just an end to an unprecedented interstellar conflict. It was a deeply contemplative examination of legacy, the heavy price of peace, and the enduring marks that an extraordinary group of individuals left upon history. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was thick with a profound sense of accomplishment and inevitable farewells, as a legendary cast prepared to step away from the iconic station that had served as their creative crucible. The studio had successfully constructed a monumental epic that completely transformed the landscape of modern television, demonstrating that science fiction could possess the literary depth of a classic tragedy and the emotional resonance of a timeless human drama. This delicate exploration of memory and newly inherited burdens was vividly brought to life in the show's final chapter through a character who had to step into the narrative under almost impossible circumstances. Nicole de Boer joined the ensemble as Esri Dax, a young counselor who suddenly found herself joined with a centuries-old symbiont, inheriting lifetimes of complex memories, deep passions, and unresolved grief that she was entirely unprepared to handle. De Boer, born in 1970 and entering the production in its final season at 28, brought a beautiful, nervous honesty and a vulnerable openness to a role that could have easily been overshadowed by the legacy of her predecessor. Esri mattered deeply because she humanized the overwhelming weight of the past, struggling openly to find her own unique voice amidst a chorus of ancient lifetimes speaking within her own mind. Her complex, emotionally charged interactions with Worf provided a touching, necessary closure to a devastating loss, while her professional empathy offered a gentle sanctuary for a crew battered by the horrors of war. In 2026, at 56 years old, DeBoer's performance stands as a brilliant reminder that defining who you are is a beautiful, difficult journey, made even more profound when the echoes of the past refused to remain silent. While Ezri struggled to integrate the past into the present, the political landscape of the war produced one of the most astonishing and unexpected studies of personal redemption ever put to film. Casey Biggs delivered a masterful performance as Damar, a character who initially began his journey as a faceless, loyal soldier, blindly following orders because obedience was far easier than listening to his own conscience. Biggs, who was 38 when the series began, slowly peeled away the layers of his character's nationalism to reveal a man hollowed out by the agonizing realization that his unquestioned loyalty had helped hand his beloved homeland over to a ruthless foreign tyranny. Damar's transformation from a compromised collaborator into a fierce, tragic resistance leader was played with an extraordinary, exhausted restraint, allowing the character's profound guilt and emerging heroism to surface through heavy silences rather than grand theatrical speeches. His heartbreaking sacrifice in the final hours of the conflict forced the audience to confront the deeply uncomfortable moral question of whether a person who has actively participated in oppression can truly find redemption by choosing to fight it. Now, 71 years old in 2026, Biggs' spectacular work remains a monumental high point of the series, showing that true redemption is never a clean restoration of purity, but rather the painful, brave moment when remaining silent finally becomes completely impossible, in sharp contrast to the high-stakes political maneuvers and grand military strategies. The emotional anchor of ordinary civilian life on the station was beautifully sustained by a woman who reminded the audience of what was truly at stake. Rosalind Chow brought an extraordinary intelligence, dignity, and principles to Keiko O'Brien, a talented botanist, devoted wife, and fiercely loving mother, trying to cultivate a normal, meaningful life in a place defined by constant peril. Chow, born in 1957, carried her character forward from a previous series, ensuring that Keiko was never reduced to a passive bystander, but was instead portrayed as a fiercely independent individual with her own vital convictions and professional identity. Her beautifully realistic marriage to Chief O'Brien became one of the most celebrated relationships in the franchise, precisely because the writers and actors refused to idealize it. They showed the genuine arguments, the deep exhaustion, the mutual misunderstandings, and the unwavering, unshakable loyalty that defines true partnership under pressure. In 2026, at 69 years of age, Chow's grounding performance stands as a vital reminder that history is not merely shaped on distant battlefields by soldiers in uniform, but is quietly won every single day by the ordinary families who possess the immense courage to build a home in the shadow of war. This vital civilian perspective and hidden strength were beautifully complemented by the bright, transformative presence of an individual who refused to let the world dictate her worth. Chase Masterson brought an immense warmth, genuine sincerity, and a quiet, evolving confidence to Lita, a character who easily could have remained a superficial fixture in the background of the station's bustling marketplace. Masterson, entering the production at 32, masterfully challenged every assumption held by the audience and the foreign society around her, transforming a simple hospitality worker into a proud, politically conscious woman who actively supported labor rights and championed social progress. Her beautiful, touching romance with Rom was built on mutual respect and a shared belief in human dignity, offering a joyful, revolutionary contrast to the cutthroat exploitation that dominated the world around them. Now 63 years old in 2026, Masterson's enduring legacy within the fandom is a beautiful testament to the idea that softness should never be mistaken for weakness, and that being underestimated by society can become a powerful weapon for positive change. Alongside her stood Penny Johnson-Gerald as Captain Cassidy Yates, a fiercely independent freighter captain who challenged the authority of the High Command and captured the heart of Captain Sisko. Gerald, who is 65 in 2026, infused Cassidy with a magnificent, grounded strength, portraying a woman who belonged entirely to herself, proving that true love is at its absolute strongest when it does not erase a person's independence, but stands proudly beside it through the fiercest storms of life. In early 2026, the legacy of Star Trek Deep Space Nine experienced a monumental resurgence within the entertainment industry when the new Paramount Plus series, Star Trek Starfleet Academy, dedicated a special tribute episode to the enduring impact of Captain Benjamin N. Sisko. While the 78-year-old Avery Brooks remains firmly retired from screen acting, the production secured his personal blessing and cooperation through his close relationship with former co-star Cirroc Lofton, incorporating a licensed vocal track from Brooks' spoken word album into the episode's highly publicized emotional climax. This rare creative involvement from the reclusive actor, combined with a heartfelt production title card explicitly thanking him, sparked immense global media coverage and intense debate within international fan communities regarding the definitive resolution of his legendary character's journey. Off-camera, the historic nature of the event was further cemented when Brooks placed a personal phone call to the production team, formally passing the thematic torch of the franchise to newcomer Keris Brooks and proving that his commanding influence over Hollywood history remains entirely unshakable.